Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had tickets for the Bahamas pre-boarding gala for months, and the Christmas charity event right after," my mother yelled, her voice piercing through my hospital room, making my already throbbing head pound even harder. I sat there stunned, clutching my phone with trembling hands, a wave of nausea washing over me that had nothing to do with my condition. It was Christmas Eve at Phoenix Medical Center, where my late husband Matthew had once worked saving children's lives. My 2-year 11-month-old twins Noah and Emma were playing quietly in the corner, Noah lining up medical pamphlets with unusual focus while Emma watched protectively. Elena, the pediatric nurse who had known Matthew, continued checking my vitals with gentle efficiency, her face displaying the compassion my mother's lacked. The pain from my pregnancy complications was excruciating, like hot knives twisting inside me, but the cold indifference on my mother's face through the video call cut deeper than any physical agony ever could. My name is Catherine Reynolds. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. My younger sister Haley, now a pediatric resident and the first doctor in the family, could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I'm just the medical illustrator, the artist who couldn't get a real profession. Now I couldn't even get them to watch their only grandchildren while I underwent emergency surgery for pregnancy complications related to the hypertension that developed after my husband's death 9 months ago. The doctors had discovered I was at severe risk for a stroke, and the baby, Matthew's final gift to me, a pregnancy I hadn't known about until after his funeral, was in distress. But all Howard and Marion Reynolds cared about was their social calendar and networking with important people at their gala. "Mom, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "Dr. Finn says I have a 35% risk of stroke if we don't do this surgery immediately. The baby might not." I couldn't finish the sentence as my throat tightened with fear. "Don't be so dramatic, Catherine," my father's voice boomed as he leaned into the frame. "You should get a second opinion from a real doctor, not just anyone. Call your sister if you're so concerned. We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems dragging us down." The irony was crushing. I'd been supporting my parents financially since they took early retirement 3 years ago. Every month without fail, I sent them $2,500 as an investment in their retirement fund, a tax scheme they had convinced me was beneficial for all of us. Even after Matthew died of a heart attack while working a double shift, I continued the payments out of familial duty, believing blood meant something. How painfully naive I'd been. As my tears fell silently onto the hospital blanket, Elena squeezed my shoulder with warm, steady hands. "My friend Jasmine is a professional nanny who specializes in developmental psychology. She has experience with children like Noah who need extra support. Let me call her for you," she offered, her Filipino accent soft and comforting, her kindness a lifeline in my sea of despair. The twins were too young to fully understand, but Noah had been regressing since Matthew died, hardly speaking anymore. They'd already lost their father. Now they might lose me and their unborn sibling if the surgery went wrong. The thought sent cold terror through my veins, but not as much as imagining them with people who saw their special needs as inconveniences. In that moment, with pain knifing through my abdomen and betrayal crushing my heart, I made my decision. "Yes, please call her," I told Elena, my voice steadier than I expected. And with those words, I began severing the toxic ties to the people who had raised me but never truly accepted me. As I ended the call, a flood of painful memories washed over me, each one stinging like salt in an open wound. My childhood had been a series of moments where I stood in Haley's shadow, applauding her achievements while mine gathered dust. When I graduated from art school with highest honors and a prestigious medical illustration internship, my parents barely glanced at my portfolio because Haley had been accepted into a summer medical program that same weekend. "Real doctors save lives, Katie. Your drawings are nice," my mother had said with that dismissive wave of her manicured hand. When I married Matthew at the hospital chapel, a place meaningful to us both since we'd met over a medical textbook illustration project, they complained incessantly about the venue. "Couldn't you find somewhere more impressive? What will our friends think?" Even when the twins were born prematurely, they visited just once, staying only 30 minutes before my father checked his watch and mentioned their golf tournament. "The babies are too fussy," my mother had said, wrinkling her nose when Noah cried. "And that medical equipment is depressing. Call us when they're older and more interactive." Matthew had been my sanctuary in the storm of family disappointment. He understood the pain of parental rejection intimately. With his dyslexia, his father had labeled him slow and not college material, never believing he could become a doctor. "We'll build our own family," he would whisper as we lay in bed at night, his fingers tracing patterns on my growing belly. "One that celebrates differences and knows how to love without conditions." And we did create that haven, our small apartment filled with Matthew's medical journals, my illustrations, and eventually, the joyful chaos of twins. But 9 months ago, that dream shattered when Matthew collapsed during a double shift. The heart attack was sudden and fatal, the price of his dedication to his patients, of skipping meals and working endless hours. The hospital staff, his colleagues and friends, had been devastated, many of them now looking after me with extra care. I was left alone to raise our children while battling crushing grief and the dawning realization that Noah's development wasn't progressing typically. Despite my loss and mounting medical bills for Noah's evaluations, I continued supporting my parents' lavish retirement lifestyle. I even increased the monthly investment to $3,000 when they mentioned struggling to maintain their country club membership due to inflation. "It's a tax strategy that benefits us all," my father had insisted, though I now suspected it had only ever benefited them. I wanted to be better than them, to be the daughter who honored family ties even when they felt like chains. The bitter irony cut deep into my heart. Here I was, my blood pressure dangerously high, carrying Matthew's final gift, a child who might not survive, and they couldn't miss one pre-boarding cruise event to care for my vulnerable children. Not even for the grandson who needed special routines and comfort objects just to make it through each day without meltdowns. Elena returned with hope in her eyes. "Jasmine will be here in 40 minutes. She's incredible with children who have developmental differences," she assured me, adjusting my four with practiced hands. She used to work with trauma victims in the pediatric psychology department before becoming a specialized nanny. Marcus is Dr. Porter recommended her for many of Matthew's patients' families. "How much will this cost?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. Medical bills were already overwhelming me since Matthew's life insurance had been reduced, the renewal paperwork delay he'd never had time to complete. Noah's speech therapy wasn't fully covered, and now this hospitalization. "Don't worry about that now," Elena said firmly, her dark eyes warm with understanding. "I've already spoken with Dr. Finn about applying for the hospital's hardship program. Matthew was family to us here. We take care of our own." But worry had become my constant companion. My mind raced to the $3,000 scheduled to transfer to my parents next week, money that could instead pay for Noah's therapy sessions, Emma's preschool assessment, or this emergency childcare. The text messages from my father last week flashed before my eyes. "Don't forget to increase the transfer this month. We've committed to the Bahamas Cruise Platinum package based on your investment." Something shifted inside me then, a spark of self-preservation that had been extinguished years ago. It flared suddenly into a protective flame, not just for me, but for my children and the unborn baby fighting for life inside me. When Jasmine arrived, her warm smile and confident demeanor immediately put me at ease. She knelt down to Noah's level, noticing his precise line of medical pamphlets without disturbing them. "That's some excellent organizing, Noah," she said softly. "I see you're making patterns with the colors." Noah didn't speak but glanced up briefly, more acknowledgement than he typically gave strangers. Emma watched cautiously before deciding to show Jasmine her stuffed elephant. As the hospital staff prepared me for surgery, the anesthesiologist explaining risks while nurses attached monitors, I reached a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Could you bring me my phone one more time?" I asked Elena, my voice stronger than it had been all day. With shaking hands but resolute heart, I sent 3 crucial messages. The first was to my bank, canceling all future automatic transfers to my parents' account and removing their access to my emergency fund. The second was to Tyler, my colleague at the design firm, asking him to contact my medical illustration clients and explain my emergency absence. The third was to my parents. I will no longer be providing financial investments to fund your retirement lifestyle. My children, including Noah with his developmental needs that you've dismissed as just needing discipline, deserve every resource I can provide. The tax scheme ends today. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to be actual grandparents, not financial dependents. Dr. Finn appeared at my bedside, her experienced face serious but kind. Catherine, we need to move now. Your blood pressure is still climbing, and the fetal monitors are showing signs of distress. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, with Elena promising to stay with the twins and Jasmine until they were settled, I felt something unexpected cutting through the fear and physical pain, a fierce, liberating sense of freedom and maternal protection that burned away decades of guilt and obligation. The surgery was successful in saving my life, but the cost was devastating. I lost Matthew's baby, our final connection, and was left physically weaker than the doctors had anticipated. The Christmas Day emergency C-section and treatment for severe preeclampsia had taken a brutal toll on my body. I spent 7 days in the hospital, drifting in and out of consciousness, waves of grief crashing over me each time I woke up enough to remember what I'd lost. Through it all, I felt overwhelming gratitude for Jasmine, who had gone above and beyond by staying with the twins in my hospital room during visiting hours and taking them to my cramped condominium at night. Elena arranged for her nursing shifts to overlap with my care whenever possible, and I often woke to find her quietly checking my vitals while humming Filipino lullabies that somehow soothed my shattered heart. Noah asked for his drawing book this morning, Jasmine reported during one of my more lucid moments. He lined up all your colored pencils by size and waited for you. When I explained you were still resting, he drew a picture of stick figures in a hospital. I think he understands more than we realize. It was during this conversation that I noticed my phone blinking with notifications. 36 missed calls and dozens of text messages from my parents. 3 voicemails from Haley. I asked Elena to hold the phone for me as I scrolled through the messages, my hands still too weak and shaky to manage it myself. Most of my parents' messages followed an infuriatingly predictable pattern: initial confusion about why the investment transfer hadn't occurred, escalating to indignation, then outright anger, and finally desperate pleas about their financial commitments. The cruise line won't refund our platinum package deposit. The country club dues are past due. Our financial advisor said this disruption could trigger an audit. Not once, not a single time, did they ask how my surgery went, whether I had survived the 35% stroke risk, or if I had lost the baby. Not one question about their grandchildren's well-being. The final message from my father was particularly revealing. Catherine, this medical drama has gone far enough. You can't just cut us off like this based on medically unnecessary procedures. You should have consulted with a proper specialist like your sister instead of these random doctors. We've already committed to an exclusive medical investment opportunity based on your promised funds. Haley's messages were strikingly different. The first was professionally detached. Mom and Dad mentioned you were having some minor procedure. As a medical professional, I'd be happy to review your case. The second, sent hours later, showed growing concern. Catherine, I called the hospital and they said you were in ICU. What's happening? Mom and Dad are only talking about money issues. The third, left after she'd apparently spoken directly with Dr. Finn, was filled with unmistakable horror and guilt. Oh my God, Katie. Dr. Finn told me everything. The pregnancy, the preeclampsia, the emergency C-section. I had no idea. I'm coming as soon as I can get coverage for my shifts. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. The stark reality hit me like a physical blow. My parents had deliberately minimized my life-threatening condition to Haley, dismissing it as attention-seeking behavior to justify their choice of social obligations over their daughter and grandchildren in medical crisis. With Elena's help, I dictated a detailed message to Haley, explaining everything from Noah's developmental concerns to the years of financial manipulation disguised as family investment strategy. Her response came within minutes, the message so long it took multiple screens. "I feel sick about all of this. They told me you were being dramatic about a routine prenatal check. I would have come immediately if I'd known the truth. I would have cancelled my shift and been there for the twins. Dr. Finn says you lost the baby and nearly died yourself. How could they? I don't even have words. I'm requesting emergency family leave. I'll be on a flight tomorrow morning. I've spent my career learning to save children while completely failing to see what was happening in my own family. I'm so sorry, Katie. This ends now." For the first time, I saw through the fog of lifelong family dynamics to recognize that Haley wasn't my enemy or competitor. She was another victim of our parents' manipulation, raised to believe her medical career made her inherently more valuable than my artistic one, conditioned to see my needs as secondary to her accomplishments. Perhaps this devastating revelation would help her see our parents for who they truly were. By the time I was discharged on New Year's Day, I had made several crucial decisions with clarity that only comes from confronting mortality. First, I hired Jasmine part-time to help with the twins, particularly focused on Noah's developmental needs and establishing the consistent routines he required to thrive. Second, I contacted the hospital's legal aid program to draft a will designating Marcus, Matthew's closest friend and fellow pediatrician, as the twins' guardian should anything happen to me. Third, I blocked my parents' numbers, allowing only Haley direct contact as I cautiously evaluated her sincerity. Dr. Finn insisted on weekly follow-up appointments, concerned about my blood pressure and slow physical recovery. "The emotional stress you've been under is literally toxic to your healing process," she explained during my discharge consultation. "I'm prescribing boundaries as aggressively as I'm prescribing these medications. Your health depends on it." The financial implications of my decision were both terrifying and liberating. The $3,000 monthly investment I'd been making to my parents represented over a third of my income as a medical illustrator. Without that crushing burden, I could actually afford Noah's speech therapy, proper childcare, and perhaps even start rebuilding the emergency fund that had been depleted after Matthew's death and the reduced life insurance payout. Marcus helped me navigate the hospital's financial assistance program. "Matthew would be furious about what they've put you through," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger as he reviewed my parents' messages. "Let me talk to the billing department. There are hardship provisions for situations exactly like yours." That night, as I lay in my own bed with the twins finally sleeping in their room across the hall, I felt a complex whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Grief for the baby I'd never hold. Physical pain from the surgery. Guilt, that deeply ingrained feeling that I was somehow betraying family by putting my children's needs first. Fear about managing recovery while caring for two toddlers, one with special needs. But beneath it all, I recognized an unfamiliar sensation taking root, the first tender shoots of self-respect and maternal fierceness. My phone pinged with a text from Haley, "Just landed. I had a devastating confrontation with Mom and Dad before I left. When I told them I knew the full truth about your condition, Dad actually said your artistic temperament was making you exaggerate medical concerns. I've never been so ashamed to be their daughter. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, but I'll come first thing tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about, and I want to examine Noah myself if you'll let me. You're not alone in this anymore, Katie. I promise." The message brought fresh tears to my eyes, not of despair, but cautious hope. Perhaps the family I needed had been forming all along, just not in the way I'd expected. 2 weeks after my emergency surgery, I was slowly rebuilding my physical strength, though the emotional wounds remained raw and painful. The C-section incision site burned like fire whenever I moved too quickly, and the grief of losing Matthew's baby ambushed me at unexpected moments. But despite these challenges, I found myself managing a little better each day, driven by the fierce love for the two small children depending on me. Jasmine had been nothing short of miraculous, arriving early each morning to help with the twins while implementing gentle routines that seemed to particularly help Noah. His meltdowns had decreased significantly since she'd introduced visual schedules and sensory breaks. My medical illustration clients, many of them doctors who had worked with Matthew, had been remarkably understanding about my limited availability, offering extended deadlines and even sending smaller, manageable projects I could complete during Noah's therapy sessions. Dr. Abramson specifically requested you for the Pediatric Cardiac Anatomy series, Tyler told me during one of his visits, bringing coffee and my favorite bagels. He said, and I quote, "No one captures the structural relationships with Catherine's precision and clarity. They're willing to wait until you're ready." Haley had visited every other day, bringing nutritionally balanced meals and spending quality time with the twins. Her training as a physician gave her a unique perspective on Noah's development, but she was careful not to overwhelm me with medical jargon or unsolicited advice. Our conversations were tentative at first, laden with years of competition and misunderstanding, but eventually, she began sharing insights into her own experiences with our parents. "They always positioned you as the difficult one who chose art over a real career," she admitted one evening as we watched Noah methodically stack blocks while Emma darted around the living room with boundless energy. "They'd show me your occasional texts or emails with such selective editing that it seemed like you were deliberately distancing yourself from us. I never questioned why you'd do that. I just accepted their narrative because it was easier than considering the alternative." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I was so focused on becoming the doctor they always wanted that I never noticed how they manipulated us against each other. God, Katie, I spent my residency learning to identify abuse patterns in families, and I completely missed it in my own. I was beginning to see my sister with new eyes, not as the favored golden child, but as another casualty of our parents' toxic dynamics." Her professional confidence contrasted sharply with her personal insecurity, revealing the steep price she'd paid for our parents' conditional approval. While I wasn't ready to completely trust her yet, I genuinely appreciated her efforts to bridge the chasm between us. Then came the knock at the door I had been dreading yet half expecting. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway of my building. My mother was clutching her designer handbag, the $4,000 anniversary gift I'd unknowingly funded, while nervously checking her reflection in her compact mirror. My father stood with his arms crossed, familiar impatience etched on his face, his golf tan contrasting with the white collar of his polo shirt. My heart hammered against my ribs as I hesitated, hand on the doorknob. The surge of anxiety made my still healing body throb with pain. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before opening the door just enough to speak through the gap, the security chain still firmly in place. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice surprisingly level despite the emotional storm raging inside me. "Catherine, darling, we've been absolutely beside ourselves with worry," my mother began, her voice syrupy sweet in that familiar performative way that had once fooled me. "You haven't been answering our calls or texts. We were terrified something had happened to you and those precious babies." The falseness of her concern made my stomach turn. Not once had they asked about my condition during my hospitalization. "We're managing," I replied flatly. "Now if that's all." "It's certainly not all," my father interrupted, pushing slightly against the door as if he expected immediate entry into my home. "We need to discuss this completely irresponsible financial situation you've created. The investment firm called about our portfolio valuation, and we had to liquidate our cruise package shares to cover the shortfall. Do you have any idea what kind of position you've put us in socially?" The sheer audacity took my breath away. No questions about my recovery from near death, no concern for the grandchild I'd lost, no interest in Noah's developmental challenges, just demands about money and social status. "I told you I'm ending the financial arrangement," I said, my voice hardening. I meant every word. "But sweetie," my mother pleaded, her voice rising an octave as she slipped into the manipulative tone I now recognized all too clearly, "we've structured our entire retirement around your investment contributions. Your father and I adjusted our lifestyle based on your commitment to the family financial strategy." "My commitment?" I echoed, disbelief and anger rising like bile in my throat. "I've been sending money under false pretenses, believing it was a mutually beneficial arrangement, while you couldn't even watch your grandchildren during an emergency surgery that might have killed me. You called my medical emergency dramatic and unnecessary while I was losing Matthew's baby and fighting for my life. My father's face darkened with the familiar thundercloud expression that had terrified me as a child. That's completely unfair, Catherine. We had important social obligations? More important than your daughter's life? More important than your grandchildren's well-being? I replied, righteous anger flaring through my exhaustion. Did you know Dr. Finn gave me a 35% chance of having a stroke? Did you know I lost the baby? Did you even once ask about what happened to me after you refused to help? Their silence was damning, my mother's eyes darting away from mine, my father's jaw clenching stubbornly. We made one understandable mistake in judgment, my mother whispered, her hand fluttering dramatically to her chest. Are you really going to punish us like this and destroy our retirement security? This isn't punishment, Mom. This is the natural consequence of your actions, I said, a strange calm washing over me as years of fog lifted from my thinking. I've spent my entire adult life seeking your approval and financial validation, and in my moment of greatest medical crisis, you chose a pre-boarding cruise gala over helping me. We're your parents, my father interjected, his tone shifting to invoke parental authority. You have obligations to us. And I'm a parent too, I countered, standing straighter despite the pain it caused. I would never treat Noah and Emma the way you've treated me. I would sell everything I owned before I'd abandon them in a medical emergency. Just then, Emma toddled into view behind me, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Noah followed more hesitantly, a medical illustration I'd drawn of a heart held carefully in his small hands. My mother instantly switched tactics, her expression morphing into exaggerated grandmotherly affection. There are my precious little angels, she cooed, bending down to their level. Grandma brought special presents from our trip. Would you like to see? Both children shrank back, Emma moving protectively closer to Noah, who was beginning to rock slightly, his self-soothing behavior when stressed. They regarded these virtual strangers with wary eyes, recognizing neither warmth nor safety in their presence. I think you should leave, I said quietly, newfound maternal strength flowing through me. When I'm ready to talk, if I'm ever ready, I'll reach out on my terms. But the quarterly investment deposit, my father started, his priorities crystal clear, is no longer your concern, I finished, gently but firmly closing the door and sliding the deadbolt into place with finality. The next morning, my parents returned with reinforcements, my mother's sister, Aunt Beth, who had always positioned herself as the family diplomat, smoothing over conflicts with carefully chosen words and strategically timed gifts. Catherine, sweetie, let's be reasonable and talk this through like adults, Aunt Beth called through the door, her voice carrying that familiar patronizing tone that made my teeth clench. Howard and Marion are having serious cash flow issues without your quarterly investment contribution. I stood on the other side of my locked door, one hand pressed against my still healing incision, the other holding my phone ready to call building security if necessary. They managed their finances successfully for decades before I started their investment strategy, I replied, making air quotes even though no one could see me. They chose early retirement knowing their portfolio wasn't adequate for their lifestyle. That was their decision, not my responsibility. My mother's voice cut in, higher pitched and more desperate than yesterday. We made those retirement decisions based on your promise of continued support. We've had to cancel our Bahamas cruise platinum package, and our financial advisor says we might lose the Gulf community condo. Their transparent manipulation attempts were almost laughable now that I'd stepped back from the suffocating fog of guilt they'd surrounded me with for years. When had I ever promised lifetime financial support? I'd initially agreed to a temporary arrangement after their early retirement, a one-year helping hand that had somehow evolved into an expected permanent subsidy for their luxury lifestyle. I literally just lost a child and nearly died from pregnancy complications, I said, my voice shaking with both physical weakness and emotional intensity. I'm recovering from major surgery while caring for 2 toddlers, one with developmental needs you've repeatedly dismissed. This conversation is over. I walked away from the door toward the kitchen where Jasmine was helping Noah practice using a spoon, deliberately ignoring their continued knocking and escalating demands. Noah really engaged with the occupational therapist yesterday, Jasmine said softly as I joined them, effectively drowning out the hallway commotion. He maintained eye contact for nearly 30 seconds during the bubble activity. I smiled gratefully at her, focusing on this small victory rather than the emotional siege outside my door. Eventually, the knocking stopped, but the real attack was just beginning. That afternoon, while Emma napped and Noah sorted his colored blocks with intense concentration, I received a notification for a group email from my father. The message was addressed to the entire extended family, several family friends, and, most disturbingly, several doctors from Matthew's former department, including Marcus. The lengthy email detailed how I had cruelly abandoned my parents in their time of financial vulnerability after they had sacrificed their entire lives and retirement security for my artistic career whims. The message conveniently omitted their refusal to help during my life-threatening medical emergency, instead portraying me as an ungrateful daughter who had suddenly cut them off without warning or reason. We encouraged Catherine to pursue a stable medical career like her sister Haley, the email read, but instead, she chose to draw pictures for a living, married a doctor with a pre-existing medical condition who neglected to maintain adequate life insurance, and now blames us for her financial difficulties. My hands trembled with anger as I read his dismissal of both Matthew's medical career, dedicated to helping children with developmental disabilities, and my specialized medical illustration work that educated doctors and patients. The email concluded with a thinly veiled request for financial assistance from family members to tide them over until they could recover from my betrayal. What they hadn't anticipated was the immediate backlash. My cousin Rachel, who worked in hospital administration, replied to the entire group, "Uncle Howard, didn't you just post photos of your new golf club membership last month?" And Aunt Marion, "Wasn't that a designer handbag collection you were showcasing on Instagram with the hashtag retirement goals just before Christmas?" Marcus responded with medical precision. As Matthew's colleague and friend, I feel compelled to correct several misrepresentations in this email. Matthew died of a heart attack after working a double shift caring for vulnerable children. Catherine nearly died on Christmas Day from severe preeclampsia while losing their unborn child. Howard and Marion Reynolds were invited to care for their grandchildren during this life-threatening emergency but declined due to a social event. Other family members began responding, many privately messaging me to ask for the full story. Even Aunt Beth called me directly after reading the professional responses. "I had absolutely no idea about the severity of your condition," she admitted, her voice subdued. "Howard and Marion told me you were being melodramatic about a routine prenatal appointment and using it as leverage to punish them financially for not supporting your art hobby." Meanwhile, Haley had arrived at my condo, her face flushed with righteous anger after reading the email. "I've never been so ashamed to share DNA with them," she said, pacing my living room. "To bring Matthew's medical condition into this and then contact his colleagues? It's beyond despicable." She helped me craft a single, clinical response to the family email thread, her medical training evident in the precise wording. On December 25th, I underwent emergency surgery for severe preeclampsia with a 35% risk of maternal stroke and fetal distress. I lost my baby during this procedure. My parents declined to assist with childcare during this medical crisis, citing a pre-boarding cruise gala as a priority commitment. My 2-year-old son Noah is currently undergoing evaluation for developmental differences requiring specialized therapy not covered by insurance. I am now focusing on physical recovery and providing necessary support for my surviving children without additional financial or emotional stress. Medical documentation available upon request. The response was devastating in its simplicity and medical accuracy, directly refuting my father's emotional manipulation with cold, hard facts. Within hours, the family email chain exploded with messages of support for me and harsh criticism of my parents' priorities. Elena called that evening. "Marcus showed me the email exchange," she said. "The hospital staff has started a support fund for Noah's therapy. We take care of our own, Catherine." Matthew was family to us. The support that materialized around me was nothing short of miraculous. Marcus organized a rotation of Matthew's former colleagues to check on us weekly, each bringing home-cooked meals that actually tempted my post-surgery appetite. Elena's cousin Lynn, who owned a children's boutique specializing in adaptive clothing, arrived with a wardrobe of sensory-friendly outfits perfectly suited to Noah's tactile sensitivities. These zippers are covered with soft fabric so they won't bother his skin, Lynn explained, demonstrating a specially designed jacket that looked completely normal but featured hidden accommodations. And these shirts have no tags or scratchy seams. My nephew has similar sensitivities, it makes such a difference. Tyler came by every few days, bringing coffee and bagels along with manageable illustration projects. The pediatric neurology department specifically requested your work for their new patient education materials, he told me, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. They love how you make complex medical concepts accessible without being intimidating. Haley started spending every weekend at my condo, sleeping on the pull-out couch and getting to know her niece and nephew properly for the first time. I watched with a mixture of amusement and amazement as my accomplished physician sister sat cross-legged on the floor with Noah, patiently following his lead in stacking blocks exactly as he wanted them. I spent years studying developmental patterns in children, she admitted one evening as we watched the twins finally sleeping. But I never really understood the human side until now. Noah isn't a case study, he's a brilliant little boy who sees the world through a unique lens. And Emma has more emotional intelligence at 3 than most adults I know. Most unexpectedly, Elena and Marcus connected me with a specialized support group for medical professionals' spouses who had lost their partners. Their first meeting was held via secure medical video conference so I could participate without leaving home. As I listened to others share stories of partners who had worked themselves to exhaustion caring for others, I finally felt truly understood by people who had walked my particular path. Matthew's dedication to his patients didn't kill him, another widow named Sarah said gently when I expressed guilt about not making him slow down. The broken medical system that overworks doctors and normalizes self-sacrifice did. You couldn't have prevented his heart attack any more than I could have prevented my husband's. My parents' financial situation, meanwhile, spiraled downward with startling speed. They had indeed been living astronomically beyond their means, counting on my quarterly investments to maintain their facade of successful retirement. Haley, who had reluctantly agreed to examine their financial situation at their repeated request, discovered they had taken a second mortgage on their Gulf community condo a year earlier to invest in what appeared to be a questionable medical technology venture. They've been systematically lying to everyone in the family, Haley reported, visibly shaken after reviewing their documents. They're not in danger of poverty, they're just dramatically overspent on luxury commitments. They'd be completely fine if they sold the country club membership and downgraded from the Platinum Cruise Package subscription. Haley forwarded me an email from our mother that made my blood run cold. Your father has been leveraging his connection to you as a medical family to participate in experimental medical technology investments. He's been presenting himself as having medical expertise through family connections to gain credibility with investors. Their increasingly frantic voicemails and texts continued, but with each passing day, their emotional and financial hold on me weakened. The fog of manipulation lifted further as I built something beautiful and genuine from the ashes of their betrayal, a support network based on mutual respect and authentic care rather than obligation or exploitation. 1 month after my surgery, a significant revelation occurred. My parents received notice of an investigation into a medical investment scheme they had participated in. Haley called to inform me, her voice a mixture of professional concern and personal exasperation. They're in complete panic mode, she explained, the tension evident in her usually composed doctor's voice. The SEC is investigating this company Dad invested in, something called Medinova Therapeutics. They were supposedly developing revolutionary non-invasive surgical techniques, but it appears to have been an elaborate fraud scheme. How deeply are they involved? I asked, helping Emma with her alphabet puzzle while watching Noah methodically arrange his medical illustration cards by organ system, a new interest that had emerged in recent weeks. Deeply enough that they're worried about potential legal exposure, Haley replied grimly. Dad wasn't just an investor, he was actively recruiting other retirees from their community, presenting himself as having medical industry connections through his physician daughter and son-in-law. He was receiving recruitment bonuses for bringing in new investors. But Matthew was a pediatrician specializing in developmental disabilities, not some surgical innovator, I said, feeling sick at the misuse of my late husband's profession. And you're still in residency. Facts didn't matter to them, Haley sighed heavily. They were using our medical connections to lend credibility to their recruitment efforts. Mom even created social media posts showing herself at hospital charity events, implying she was a major healthcare philanthropist. The photos of her with the hospital board? Those were from Matthew's memorial service, Catherine. They've been exploiting his death. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'm not saying you should help them, Haley added quickly. In fact, I strongly advise against it. I just thought you should know what we're dealing with. That evening, I received increasingly desperate texts from both parents, now completely abandoning any pretense of concern for my well-being or their grandchildren. They openly begged for money to hire a securities attorney. My mother's message was particularly revealing. We never actually believed you'd cut off the investment transfers for good. We assumed you were just expressing temporary anger and would resume payments after making your point. Our financial advisor based all our planning on your continued contribution. Their assumption that my boundaries weren't real, that my self-respect was ultimately negotiable, ignited a fire of indignation within me. All those years of prioritizing their needs above my own, of accepting their dismissal of my career and parenting choices, they had never truly seen me as an autonomous adult worthy of basic respect. Meanwhile, my own life was transforming in unexpected and positive ways despite the continuing challenges. The medical professionals support group had become a lifeline, connecting me with others facing the dual struggles of grief and single parenting. Through them, I met Dr. Sarah Collins, a developmental psychologist whose husband, also a physician, had died of lymphoma 2 years earlier, leaving her with a 5-year-old daughter with sensory processing difficulties. Sarah helped me navigate the complex world of developmental assessments and therapies for Noah, cutting through red tape to get him evaluated at a specialized center where her colleague owed her a favor. The early intervention will make all the difference, she assured me as we watched Noah working with his new speech therapist. He's already showing remarkable progress with the right support. With Marcus's encouragement, I'd also begun developing a series of illustrated children's books explaining medical procedures and conditions in language accessible to young patients and their siblings. The first book, When Your Heart Needs Help, featured gentle, accurate illustrations of cardiac procedures without being frightening. The hospital's pediatric department had ordered 50 copies immediately, and 3 more hospitals had reached out with interest. This is exactly what we've needed for years, Marcus told me, flipping through the proof copy with obvious admiration. Technical enough to be accurate, but gentle enough not to terrify kids. Matthew would be so proud of how you're translating medical knowledge into something healing. For the first time since becoming a widow, I felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. I was creating something meaningful that honored Matthew's legacy while supporting our children's future. The stark contrast between my personal healing and my parents' financial collapse became painfully apparent when they arrived unannounced at the hospital cafeteria where I was meeting Marcus to discuss Noah's upcoming evaluation. They spotted me immediately, navigating between tables with determined expressions, my father clutching a leather portfolio filled with meticulously organized financial documents. "Catherine, we need to speak with you," he announced, not bothering with greetings as he pulled out a chair uninvited at our table. Marcus raised an eyebrow at me questioningly. I gave him a slight nod indicating it was okay for him to stay. "We require $187,000 to settle with the investment group and prevent potential legal consequences," my father explained, opening his portfolio to reveal color-coded spreadsheets of their debts. His authoritative tone hadn't completely disappeared, but it now carried an unmistakable edge of desperation that made my stomach clench with a complex mixture of pity and vindication. I gestured for them to sit properly, noticing how the hospital staff, many of whom had known Matthew, were watching our interaction with protective concern. I wasn't engaging out of obligation, but from genuine curiosity about their perspective now that they were truly facing consequences of choices made over decades. "What about liquidating your country club membership?" I asked, pointing to a line item on their expense sheet showing $4,200 in quarterly dues. "That alone would cover your legal consultation fees." "We'd lose our social standing," my father protested, as if this explained everything. "Those connections are essential investments." "And the timeshare in Scottsdale? The cruise subscription package?" I continued, keeping my voice level despite the rising disbelief. "We've explored those options, but the markets are terribly unfavorable right now," my mother interjected quickly, adjusting her designer scarf, another luxury purchase I had unknowingly funded. "Besides, those are our retirement necessities. The doctor recommended warm climates for your father's circulation issues." I actually laughed then, a short, incredulous sound that earned a supportive glance from Marcus. "Necessities? A platinum cruise package is a necessity while your grandson's speech therapy is a questionable expense? We could maintain our standard of living with your continued investment participation," my father countered, his tone hardening as he slipped back into financial advisor mode. "It's really the minimum you could contribute considering everything we've sacrificed for your artistic pursuits." The familiar words hung in the air between us, but this time, they landed differently. 9 months of grief, a near-death experience, and weeks of recovery had burned away my susceptibility to their manipulation. "What exactly have you sacrificed for me?" I asked quietly, the question hanging in the cafeteria air like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and cutting. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly unprepared for direct questioning of their parental narrative. My mother jumped in with practiced emotion. "We supported your decision to pursue art school instead of a practical degree, even though we knew it would limit your prospects. You refused to contribute to my education because it wasn't medical school," I corrected calmly. "Matthew and I paid off those student loans together while simultaneously funding Haley's medical school expenses at your insistence." Just then, Elena appeared with the twins, who had been enjoying supervised playtime in the pediatric recreation area while I met with Marcus. Noah clutched his communication picture book, a tool his speech therapist had created, while Emma skipped alongside, proudly wearing a stethoscope someone had let her borrow. My parents' expressions underwent an immediate transformation, their faces softening into exaggerated affection. "There are our precious little angels," my mother exclaimed, reaching for Emma, who instinctively stepped back, moving closer to her brother. "Who are these people?" Emma asked Elena loudly with the directness only a 3-year-old can master. Noah began stimming slightly, rubbing his palm against his picture book, his typical response to unfamiliar social pressure. "They're your grandparents," I explained gently, watching as Noah processed this information with serious consideration. "Daddy's parents live far away, but these are my parents." "They don't know you," I continued, addressing my parents directly as Elena guided the twins to sit with Marcus, who immediately engaged Noah with a calm medical illustration game. "You've seen them perhaps 3 times since their birth, and never since Matthew died. Noah has developed preferences, sensitivities, and remarkable skills you know nothing about. Emma speaks in complex sentences and has memorized the names of every major organ in the human body from my illustrations. You chose not to be part of their lives." "That's completely unfair," my father protested, though with less conviction than usual. "We've been busy with retirement commitments." "Too busy for your only grandchildren? Too busy to support your daughter through life-threatening pregnancy complications? Too busy to attend their father's funeral reception? But never too busy to request money for luxury cruises and questionable investments?" I observed, my voice remaining steady despite the emotions churning within me. "I think that says everything about what you truly value in this life." My mother's face crumpled, her eyes filling with tears that might have been genuine emotion or simply another tool in her manipulation arsenal. I could no longer tell the difference, nor did it matter. "Without your financial assistance, we'll lose everything," she whispered, reaching toward me across the table. Our reputation, our home, our entire retirement lifestyle. I glanced over at my children, Noah carefully arranging medical cards with Matthew's colleague, Emma chattering happily with Elena about listening to heart sounds. Then I looked back at my parents, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time the emptiness behind their carefully cultivated facade of success. I lost my husband, I replied, my voice steady but not unkind. My children lost their father. Noah lost his developmental stability. I lost our unborn baby. We're rebuilding our lives without the person who mattered most to us. We're not just surviving, we're finding meaning and connection. You'll find your way too, though it might look different than you planned. My father started to protest, but Marcus interrupted gently. Noah's speech therapy appointment starts in 15 minutes, Catherine. We should probably head upstairs. I nodded gratefully, standing to gather the twins. I hope you find ethical financial guidance, I told my parents as Elena helped Noah collect his picture cards. I can't be that resource for you anymore. As we walked away, Emma looked back at my parents with innocent curiosity. They don't smile with their eyes, she observed with surprising insight. Not like Daddy did in the pictures. No, I agreed softly. Not everyone knows how. 3 months after my surgery, my parents faced the inevitable legal and financial fallout from their involvement in the medical investment scheme. They were forced to sell their Gulf community condominium to settle with investors they had recruited. Haley kept me updated on their situation, though I maintained my necessary distance for my own healing. They had downsized to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a standard retirement community, a significant change from their 3,800 square foot luxury condo with panoramic golf course views. My father had reluctantly surrendered his country club membership and platinum cruise package subscription, while my mother had sold much of her designer wardrobe through a high-end consignment shop. They've created an entirely new narrative about their financial collapse, Haley informed me during one of her weekly visits, her expression a mixture of professional clinical detachment and personal disbelief. It's fascinating from a psychological perspective, but infuriating as your sister. They tell anyone who will listen that you abandoned them after promising lifelong investment partnership when they supported your artistic dreams. Let them construct whatever story helps them sleep at night, I replied, feeling a surprising calm as I watched Noah stacking his blocks in perfect color-coordinated towers. The hospital records and SEC investigation documents speak for themselves. And they did. The extended family had rallied around me after learning the full truth, particularly when the details of the investment scheme became public in local financial circles. Even my father's brother Edward, a corporate attorney who had always defended my father's business decisions, called to express his unequivocal support. I reviewed the investment materials Howard was distributing, he told me gravely. Using Matthew's medical credentials posthumously to lend credibility to that scheme was unconscionable. I've offered to help them restructure their finances, but not their narrative. Meanwhile, my own life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days in the hospital. Sarah from my support group had connected me with a developmental pediatrician who helped Noah receive an official diagnosis that unlocked insurance coverage for his specialized therapy. Marcus and Elena had helped me find and purchase a small 3-bedroom house near the hospital in a neighborhood with excellent early intervention programs. The mortgage payments were actually less than my condominium fees had been, and the twins had a secure backyard with a sensory garden designed specifically for Noah's needs. My medical illustration business had expanded beyond my expectations. The children's medical education books had been picked up by a publisher specializing in patient education materials, with a 5-book contract that provided meaningful work I could do during Noah's therapy sessions and Emma's preschool hours. Jasmine still provided specialized care 3 days a week, implementing professional developmental strategies that had dramatically improved Noah's communication skills. He used a complete sentence today, she reported excitedly one afternoon. When Emma took his blue crayon, he looked at her and said, "Emma, I need the blue crayon please," instead of melting down. That's huge progress. Most significantly, I'd found a community that understood and valued both me and my children exactly as we were. The hospital staff continued to include us in family events, honoring Matthew's memory while supporting our future. The parents from Noah's developmental playgroup organized regular sensory-friendly activities where he could participate comfortably. Haley had become a genuine sister and aunt, spending her limited free time building a relationship with Emma and Noah based on their unique personalities rather than family obligation. Even Tyler had become part of our extended family circle, helping Emma with art projects while I worked on illustration deadlines. Lynn regularly brought adaptive clothing samples for Noah to test, valuing his specific sensory feedback. "He's my best product developer," she would joke, watching him carefully evaluate fabric textures. I had lost my husband, my unborn child, and the illusion of parental support, yet somehow I felt more authentically connected and supported than ever before. The community we'd built wasn't based on obligation or financial transactions, but on genuine care and mutual respect, exactly the kind of family Matthew and I had always envisioned creating. One evening, as I sat on the back porch watching Noah and Emma chase fireflies in our small garden, Haley joined me with 2 mugs of tea. Noah pointed to a picture of Dad today and said, "Grandpa not nice to Mommy," she reported, her expression thoughtful. "His emotional intelligence is remarkable. He understands so much more than they ever gave him credit for. He sees patterns in everything, including people's behavior," I replied, watching as Emma patiently showed her brother how to gently capture and release the glowing insects. "That's his superpower." 1 year after my near-fatal Christmas surgery, I received an unexpected envelope in my hospital mailbox, a thick cream-colored stationery with my mother's distinctive handwriting. Dr. Finn had arranged for me to have workspace at the hospital's medical illustration department 3 days a week, allowing me to collaborate directly with physicians while staying close to Noah's therapy sessions. I almost discarded the envelope unopened, but professional curiosity, the same quality that made me a detailed medical illustrator, won out. Inside was something I'd never witnessed in 34 years, what appeared to be a genuine acknowledgement of responsibility. "I've had time to reflect on my behaviors since Howard's cardiac event," she wrote in her precise penmanship. "Watching you rebuild your life without our financial involvement has forced me to confront painful truths about myself as a mother and grandmother. I was envious of your artistic talent and professional independence, abilities I surrendered to maintain social status. I resented that you created a meaningful career that didn't require my validation. But now I understand that you did need family support, just not in the form of financial dependency that we tried to create. When you asked us to care for Noah and Emma during your life-threatening emergency, you were offering us connection to our grandchildren, and we catastrophically failed you. For this and so much more, I am deeply sorry." The letter continued, detailing their dramatically altered circumstances. The medical investment scheme investigation had concluded with my father receiving a substantial fine rather than criminal charges. He had taken a part-time position leading finance workshops at a community center, helping other retirees avoid similar investment pitfalls. They had liquidated their remaining luxury possessions and were living modestly for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. Most surprisingly, she mentioned they had begun attending a support group for grandparents of children with developmental differences. She didn't request money, forgiveness, or even a response, just acknowledgement that I had received her words. I showed the letter to Haley during our weekly dinner, while Emma taught Noah her new hand-clapping game at the kitchen table. My sister's expression remained professionally neutral but skeptical. "They've been discussing this communication for weeks," she revealed, carefully selecting her words. "Dad resisted initially, but his perspective shifted dramatically after his myocardial infarction 2 months ago." "Heart attack?" I asked, feeling a complicated surge of concern despite our estrangement. "You didn't mention that." "It was moderate, a warning rather than devastating damage. But facing mortality tends to reorganize priorities," Haley explained with the calm clinical detachment that had become her emotional shield. "His cardiologist prescribed lifestyle modifications and medication that he's actually following with surprising compliance." The experience seems to have triggered genuine self-reflection, though I remain cautious about their capacity for lasting change. I wasn't prepared to respond immediately. I needed time to process this unexpected development while maintaining the boundaries that had allowed me to heal. Was this authentic remorse or simply their most sophisticated manipulation yet? Had they truly evolved, or merely adapted their strategy to changed circumstances? That evening, after tucking the twins into bed, I examined old family photographs I'd stored away after cutting ties. Behind the performance of perfect family unity, I now recognized patterns that had been invisible to me before: how my mother's arm around me always appeared possessive rather than protective, how my father positioned himself as the central figure in every image, how even in my college graduation photo, their expressions conveyed ownership of my achievement rather than pride in my accomplishment. 6 months later, after careful consideration and several more letters that requested nothing but continued to demonstrate self-awareness, I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, the hospital cafeteria, where Marcus and other staff could provide subtle support if needed. When Howard and Marion Reynolds arrived, I barely recognized them. My father moved more carefully, his confident stride replaced by the measured pace of someone who had experienced physical vulnerability. My mother's designer wardrobe had been exchanged for simple, quality basics, her previously highlighted hair now naturally gray. Noah and Emma were spending the afternoon with Jasmine at a sensory-friendly museum exhibition. I wasn't prepared for a family reunion. This was an assessment, not a reconciliation. We sat in uncomfortable silence until my father did something I had never witnessed in my lifetime. He wept openly, without manipulation or performance. "I've been a catastrophic failure as a father," he admitted, his voice breaking with genuine emotion, "and an inexcusably absent grandfather. I don't expect or deserve your forgiveness, Catherine. But I need you to know that I finally see the truth now, how profoundly selfish and controlling we've been throughout your life." My mother reached across the table, stopping short of touching my hand but extending her palm upward. "We've been attending family therapy with a specialist in narcissistic family systems," she explained, vulnerability evident in her typically controlled voice. "It was initially required by the settlement agreement, but it's become transformative. We see now how we treated you as an extension of ourselves rather than as your own person. I didn't rush toward reconciliation or make promises I couldn't keep. Instead, I shared my professional news, the publication of my third children's medical book and the hospital's decision to create a permanent position for me developing patient education materials. I showed them recent photos of the twins, Noah constructing elaborate block structures, Emma painting a surprisingly accurate heart diagram. They listened without interrupting, without making the conversation about themselves, perhaps for the first time in our relationship. As our awkward meeting concluded, my father asked hesitantly, would it be possible, someday, to establish a relationship with our grandchildren? On your terms entirely, of course. I considered this request carefully before answering. That depends entirely on your consistent actions, not momentary intentions. If you genuinely commit to understanding Noah's developmental needs without judgment, if you can truly respect my professional choices and parenting decisions, we can begin with brief, supervised visits. But understand this completely: my children will only have relationships with adults who demonstrate unwavering respect for their mother. Walking away from that meeting toward the pediatric wing where Noah's therapy session was concluding, I felt neither the suffocating weight of obligation nor the burning resentment that had characterized our relationship for decades. Instead, I experienced something entirely new: the calm assurance of a woman who recognized her worth, who had established boundaries based on mutual respect, and who would maintain them without apology or justification. Whether my parents could sustain meaningful change remained to be seen, but I had already transformed, from a daughter desperate for validation into a mother fierce in her protection and clear in her expectations, an artist confident in her professional contribution, and a woman complete in herself. That Christmas, a year after nearly losing my life, Noah spoke his longest sentence yet during our small celebration with our chosen family of hospital staff, support group members, and Haley. "I love my mama and Emma and our new family." Our circle of authentic connection had given him the security to find his voice, just as it had given me the strength to find mine. My mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand, her fingers hovering in the space between us like a question. "We've been attending weekly family therapy sessions with a specialist in multi-generational trauma," she explained, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "It was Haley who insisted. She actually threatened to cut ties with us too if we refused. We resisted fiercely at first, calling it pseudoscientific nonsense, but I can't deny how transformative the process has been." I noticed the absence of her usual diamond rings, the status symbols she'd once considered essential extensions of her identity. The hands reaching toward mine were bare except for her simple wedding band, the nails practical and unpolished. I didn't rush toward forgiveness or make promises I couldn't keep. The damage was too deep, the trust too thoroughly shattered for quick reconciliation. Instead, I shared my phone's gallery of recent photographs, Noah in his sensory garden, carefully examining a caterpillar with intense concentration, Emma proudly holding up the anatomically correct heart she'd painted at preschool, both twins feeding ducks at the pond near our new home. I told them about Noah's breakthrough in speech therapy and Emma's remarkable memory for medical terminology. They listened without interrupting, without redirecting the conversation to their social connections or financial concerns, perhaps for the first time in our relationship. My father's eyes misted over when I showed him a picture of Noah wearing a child-sized lab coat Marcus had given him, complete with a toy stethoscope like the one Matthew had used. As our strained meeting drew to a close, my father leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Would it be possible, someday, to truly know our grandchildren? To be real grandparents to them?" I considered his question with the careful deliberation I'd learned from Matthew's approach to difficult diagnoses, weighing evidence, considering outcomes, assessing potential risks and benefits. "That depends entirely on your actions moving forward, not on promises or words," I finally responded, my voice measured but firm. "If you demonstrate genuine commitment to change, we can begin with brief, supervised visits at Noah's comfort level. But understand this completely, my children will only have relationships with adults who consistently show authentic respect for their mother, who honor Noah's developmental needs without judgment, and who value Emma's sensitive heart." Walking away from that hospital cafeteria meeting, I felt neither the crushing weight of familial obligation nor the burning resentment that had defined our relationship for so many years. Instead, I experienced something entirely new, the quiet confidence of a woman who recognized her intrinsic worth, who had established necessary boundaries based on mutual respect, and who would maintain them without apology or justification. Whether my parents could sustain meaningful transformation remained uncertain, but I had already fundamentally changed, evolved from a daughter desperately seeking validation into a mother fierce in her protection, an illustrator confident in her professional contribution, and a woman secure in her autonomous identity and clear in her expectations.